A hammer is found inside stone, not beside stone, not under stone. Inside it, that is the image that made the London hammer famous, a wooden handle, a metal head, encased in a hard lump of rock. And if you hear the story in its most dramatic form, the conclusion seems explosive. If the stone is ancient and the hammer is modern-looking, then something is wrong with history. Maybe humans existed far earlier than textbooks admit. Maybe geological dating is broken. Maybe the past is hiding evidence that does not fit. Maybe this ordinary hammer is not ordinary at all. That is the emotional power of an impossible artifact. It gives you a simple object and a huge implication. It says, if this is real, everything changes. But the London hammer is not a good case because it rewrites history. It is a good case because it teaches us how history gets rewritten too quickly. It shows how a dramatic photograph can outrun context, how a mystery can grow around a missing excavation record, how a concretion can become a time capsule in the public imagination, and how curiosity, if it does not slow down, can accidentally become a machine for producing false certainty. The London hammer is not worthless. It is a perfect object lesson, not an ancient technology and evidence. The London hammer is associated with London, Texas, and is commonly said to have been found in the 1930s. The basic story is that a hammer-like object was discovered embedded in a rock or concretion. Over time, it became popular in creationist and alternative history circles as an out-of-place artifact. Out-of-place artifacts are objects that seem to appear where they should not. A tool in ancient stone, a footprint in impossible rock, a machine-like object in a culture supposedly too early to make it. These stories work because they create tension between object and timeline. If the object is real, and the context is real, then the accepted timeline must be wrong. That is the promise. The London hammer's promise is simple. If a human-made hammer is genuinely encased in rock millions of years old, then something dramatic must be reconsidered. But there is a hidden assumption inside that sentence. The rock must actually be millions of years old in the way the claim requires. The hammer must be securely proven to have been inside that rock since the rock formed. The find must have reliable context. The object must not be a relatively recent hammer surrounded by a much younger mineral concretion. And that is where the dramatic version begins to weaken. Because the London hammer's strongest problem is not the hammer, it is the context. An artifact without context is like a witness with amnesia. It can still tell us something. Material, shapeware, manufacturing style, corrosion, but it cannot tell us the whole story. Where exactly was it found? In what layer? Was it embedded in bedrock, loose stone, a concretion, or a nodule? Was it photographed and placed before removal? Who removed it? Were trained archaeologists or geologists present? Was the surrounding sediment recorded? Were samples taken from the exact find location? Were chain of custody records kept? These questions may sound dry, but they are the difference between evidence and legend. For an object that supposedly overturns major timelines, the standard has to be high. It is not enough to say, look at this hammer and stone. We need to know how it got there. We need to know when the surrounding material formed. We need to know whether the stone is truly ancient bedrock or a younger concretion that formed around a more recent object. We need to know whether the object's style fits a known historical period. Without that, the mystery becomes mostly visual, and visual mysteries are powerful, but they can be misleading. The camera shows us the hammer. It does not show us the missing excavation. The key to the London hammer is a geological process that sounds less exciting than impossible artifact but explains a lot. Concretion. A concretion is a hard mass that forms when minerals precipitate around a nucleus. That nucleus can be many things: a fossil, a shell, a root, a pebble, an object, even something relatively recent. Mineral-rich water moves through sediment or porous material. Over time, dissolved minerals collect and harden. The result can look like stone. It can feel like stone. It can surround an object so tightly that the object appears to have been trapped inside ancient rock. But the concretion itself may be much younger than the surrounding geological formation people imagine. This is not a rare miracle. Concretions are common enough that geologists deal with them routinely. They can form around modern materials under the right conditions. Old nails, tools, and metal objects can become encased in mineral deposits. To a non-specialist, that can look like the object was sealed inside ancient stone from the beginning, but formation around an object is not the same as the object being as old as the surrounding regional geology. That distinction is central. The London hammer does not require a rewritten human timeline if the rock formed around a relatively recent hammer. It only requires mineral deposition, and nature is very good at mineral deposition. The hammer does not look like a mysterious prehistoric technology. Its form is generally consistent with historical metal tools, often compared with relatively recent mining or working hammers. That observation does not solve everything by itself, but it matters. If an object is claimed to be impossibly ancient, we should ask whether its design matches known recent tools. A truly ancient hammer from an impossible timeline might show unfamiliar manufacturing methods, strange metallurgy, or features inconsistent with later periods. But if the object looks like a 19th century or early modern style hammer, then the simpler explanation becomes stronger. A relatively recent hammer became encased in a concretion. That explanation does not require suppressing evidence. It does not require rewriting geology. It does not require a lost civilization with modern toolmaking. It only requires a human tool, mineral-rich conditions, time, and misunderstanding. This is not boring. It is actually a useful reminder that ordinary processes can create extraordinary appearances. Many mysteries survive because the true explanation sounds less cinematic than the false one. A hammer in ancient stone is instantly dramatic. A hammer inside a younger concretion is quieter, but quieter explanations are often the ones that carry the evidence. It is easy to mock people for believing stories like the London hammer. We should not. Mockery is cheap, and it usually misses the real issue. People believe impossible artifact stories because the stories satisfy real desires. The desire to discover, the desire to challenge authority, the desire to feel that history is not fully closed, the desire to see wonder in an ordinary object, the desire to believe the world is stranger than the official version. Those desires are not stupid. In fact, many real discoveries began because someone asked whether accepted ideas were incomplete. Science and history need curiosity. They need people who notice anomalies. They need people who ask uncomfortable questions. The problem is not curiosity. The problem is what happens after curiosity. Do we test the claim? Do we look for context? Do we compare simpler explanations? Do we ask what evidence would change our mind? Or do we protect the exciting story because it feels too good to lose? The London hammer is a test of that moment, the moment when curiosity either becomes investigation or becomes belief. There is a famous principle often summarized like this: extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. That phrase is sometimes overused, but here it matters. The claim that a hammer is relatively recent and became encased in concretion is ordinary. We know hammers exist. We know concretions form. We know mineral deposits can surround objects. We know historical tools can be lost, buried, dropped, or discarded. The claim that a modern-looking hammer is evidence of humans, or human-like toolmakers, in a radically impossible geological period is extraordinary. That claim would require a much stronger chain of evidence. Not just an object, not just a story, not just a photograph, not just a display label. It would require controlled context, secure dating, independent analysis, geological documentation, and explanations for why all the simpler possibilities fail. This is not unfair. It is how we protect knowledge from being overturned by weak evidence. If the timeline of human history is wrong, then strong evidence should be able to carry that claim. The London hammer does not carry it. It asks us to leap much farther than the evidence can support. The London hammer was made for the internet before the internet fully arrived. It has the perfect ingredients: a simple object, a shocking claim, a photograph that seems self-explanatory, a conflict with mainstream science, a phrase like "found in ancient rock," and a conclusion that feels enormous. That combination travels fast. Online, context often arrives last. The image appears first, then the headline, then the emotional reaction. Only later, if ever, do people ask about concretion, provenance, geology, tool style, and fine conditions. By then, the story has already done its work. It has created the feeling of hidden truth, and feelings are harder to correct than facts. This is why debunking alone often fails. If you simply say that is fake or that is stupid, people feel attacked. But if you show how the mystery was built, the viewer can keep their curiosity while upgrading their standards. That is the better approach. The London hammer is not a reason to stop wondering. It is a reason to wonder more carefully. What would make the London hammer more convincing? A controlled excavation record, clear photographs of the hammer in its original geological position before removal, independent geological analysis of the exact encasing material, reliable dating of the concretion itself, not just assumptions about regional rock age, evidence that the hammer was sealed before recent human activity could explain it, metallurgical analysis showing a manufacturing method inconsistent with known historical tools, multiple similar finds in secure contexts, published peer-reviewed analysis that rules out ordinary concretion formation. If evidence like that existed, the conversation would change. That is important. Skepticism is not supposed to mean never change your mind. Good skepticism means the claim has to meet the weight of its own implications. The London hammer does not meet that weight, but stating what would change the case keeps the discussion honest. It shows that the door is not locked, it is just not opened by weak evidence. A channel about ancient mysteries cannot only chase the most exciting interpretation. If it does, viewers eventually stop trusting it. Every artifact becomes a conspiracy. Every ambiguous object becomes lost technology. Every weak claim becomes what they don't want you to know. That may produce clicks for a while, but it destroys credibility. Debunk episodes are different. They tell the audience, we are not here to believe everything. We are here to investigate. That makes the real mysteries stronger. When we later say the Antikythera mechanism is genuinely extraordinary, it matters because we did not also pretend the London hammer rewrites geology. When we say the Nebra sky disk deserves awe, it matters because we admitted its context problems. When we say the Viking sunstone is plausible but uncertain, it matters because we are not selling certainty where it does not exist. Trust is built by restraint. The London hammer helps build that trust. It is not the strongest artifact in the series, it is one of the strongest lessons. The real mystery of the London hammer is not how a modern-looking hammer got into ancient stone. The likely answer is much more ordinary. A hammer became encased in a concretion, and its context was misunderstood or overstated. The real mystery is why the dramatic version is so hard to let go. Why do we prefer the impossible story? Why does history is wrong feel more satisfying than geology is subtle? Why does a simple object become a symbol of hidden truth? Maybe because the impossible version gives us a world with secret doors. It tells us that everything familiar is only a surface. Behind it, there is a buried reality waiting for the brave viewer to notice. That feeling is powerful. But good history offers a different kind of wonder. Not the thrill of being fooled, the thrill of understanding how the fooling happens. The London hammer is not a key to a lost civilization. It is a key to the psychology of mysteries, and that may be more useful. So what is the London hammer? Most likely, it is not an impossible ancient artifact. It is a relatively recent hammer encased in a concretion, then promoted through a story that made the surrounding material seem far older and more impossible than the evidence supports. That answer will disappoint some people, but it should not kill curiosity. It should refine it, because the lesson is not never question history. The lesson is question the claim as hard as you question the textbook. Ask where the object was found. Ask who recorded it. Ask what the surrounding material really is. Ask whether ordinary processes can explain the strange appearance. Ask what evidence would be needed if the claim were true. That is not closed-mindedness, that is respect for the past. The London hammer became famous because it seemed to place a familiar tool in an impossible place. But once we understand concretions, context, and evidence standards, the impossible begins to look very possible, not as rewritten history, as a warning about how easily history can be rewritten in our imagination, and maybe that is the most valuable thing the hammer can teach. Not that everything we know is wrong, but that wonder without discipline can turn even an ordinary tool into a false revolution. If you want a mystery that really does deserve the word extraordinary, watch the Antikythera mechanism or the Nebra sky disk. The London hammer teaches what weak evidence looks like. Those objects show what strong evidence can do. The difference is the whole point.